Ilhan Omar is being accused of tax fraud. It's a complicated story, but the general idea is that she filed her taxes jointly as though she was married when she in fact was married to a different person. While many people on the right are saying this is tax fraud, fraud requires intent, so it is complicated. It could simply be an error, in which case most people, when they make a mistake on their tax return, just got to pay the fine and you move on. The IRS doesn't go after you this hard. But it is a much more complicated story than that. There is potentially criminal intent, but we have to go through all the details and try and break this down. But more importantly, I am not doing this story because Ilhan Omar filed her taxes incorrectly, whether intentional or not. It's because a leaked email allegedly shows that the Democratic Party, the crisis control people working for Ilhan, are trying to pressure news media into quashing the story and may have done similar things in the past. I did reach out for comment to many of the parties involved. For now, it is mostly rumor. I haven't been able to confirm anything, so take it all with a grain of salt. It's just, there's some tweets going viral with some images, so I definitely thought it'd be good to address this, talk about what could or couldn't be, and where we're currently at in terms of, is Ilhan Omar, is her staff or her PR people trying to pressure news media, and have they in the past? That's what we're going to go through. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a monthly donation option, a crypto option, a physical address, but of course, just like and comment on the video because the engagement really helps. Share and subscribe. From the Associated Press, Rep. Omar filed joint tax returns before she married her husband. At the bare minimum, all we have here is she made a mistake. But let's read on and see what may be going on. The Associated Press says, Minnesota campaign finance officials said last week that Democratic U.S. Rep. Ilhan Omar misused campaign funds in violation of state rules. They also revealed that she had filed joint tax returns with her husband years before they were legally married and at a time when she was married to another man. The revelation put the freshman representative under more scrutiny from critics who have taken issue with her marital past. One tax expert said that if there is no criminal intent and the issue has been corrected, she's unlikely to face any criminal consequences. Some questions and answers about the tax issue. First, what did Omar do wrong? The Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board said Thursday that Omar and her husband, Ahmed Abdisalan Hirsi, filed joint tax return for 2014 and 15 before they were actually married and while Omar was legally wed to another man. While some states allow for joint filing for common law marriages, Minnesota does not, and filing joint tax returns with someone who is not your legal spouse is against both federal and state law. I think this part of the story is very relevant as Ilhan Omar calls for Donald Trump to publish his tax returns, as do many other people. I think, you live in glass houses, don't throw stones. And I would actually say perhaps she should now publish her tax returns as well. How did it become public? Now, this is where it gets interesting. Last year, a Republican state representative accused Omar of misusing campaign funds, alleging, among other things, that she used $2,250 in campaign money to pay a lawyer for her divorce proceedings. The Campaign Finance Board investigated and found she didn't use the funds to pay for a divorce lawyer as alleged, but other irregularities were found. The board's final report said there was an issue with her tax returns that needed to be corrected, and that some campaign funds went to an accounting firm. State officials ruled last week that Omar must repay her campaign committee nearly $3,500, including $1,500 for payments made to the accounting firm for services related to joint tax returns for 2014 and 15. Omar must also pay a $500 penalty to the state. That is the punishment. A lot of people are wondering whether or not there will be criminal proceedings. Very, very, very unlikely. Look, man, let me just put it this way. The world is boring. Do you have any idea how insane and exciting life would be if they actually came after Omar for, criminal intent in a tax filing case? These things are they're not likely to happen. They can happen. But in the end, she was penalized $500. It's a fine. There you go. She did something wrong. She paid her fine. This is common. It is very, very common. However, we'll come back to the story. But the reason why this is very interesting is that for the longest time, Ilhan Omar has been accused of marrying her brother. And what ends up happening now, so this is Snopes. I'm pulling up Snopes on purpose because Snopes is often accused of having a liberal bias. And I do not want to push conspiracy theories, so we'll use Snopes as a source. They claim that it's actually her brother. It's a complicated story that I'm not interested in covering. By all means, you can look into it yourself. This is not the purpose of the video I'm doing. But I do want to stress, this just brings up more marriage irregularities that we've seen with Ilhan Omar. She was filing joint taxes with someone she wasn't married to. Makes the whole story very strange. But I will stress that Snopes has just called this unproven. They did not call it true or false, meaning it may be true, right? They do reference that it's been an unfounded rumor, so we can say it's fair to call it unproven, but typically you see Snopes say true or false. So, I don't know how you disprove whether or not this person is her brother, so maybe it's fair to say unproven. I'm just highlighting this, not because I want anyone to believe it's true, that is not the point, just to show you that this controversy has warranted enough attention that Snopes even issued, well, they didn't debunk it, but Snopes did a report on it trying to break down what actually happened. We're now in the territory where more marriage irregularities are causing scrutiny for Ilhan Omar. So the Associated Press says that Omar hasn't really addressed this. In response to questions from the Associated Press, her campaign sent an email statement saying all of Rep. Omar's tax filings are fully compliant with applicable law. In response to the overall campaign finance investigation, she said in a statement last week that she will comply with the state board findings, calling for her to repay money and pay a penalty. They say that, question, hasn't Omar faced criticism on other issues? Yes, sure. I'm not going to get into much of the other details because I want to move on to the potential collusion between Ilhan Omar's office and a local newspaper. This is where it gets really interesting. But I do want to stress, they say in this article that criminal intent is whether or not she'll be criminally prosecuted requires intent. So far, I don't think we're at that point yet. There's been no criminal referral, but it is possible. A tax attorney said, if taxpayers incorrectly file tax returns as married filing jointly, where there is no legal marriage, it is typically not a criminal matter unless taxpayers have a strong intent to cheat on their taxes or unless they directly provide false factual information. He goes on to say that typically what happens is they'll just pay a fine and the public likely will not ever find out what actually happened here. So now we're seeing something really, really interesting. This is the Twitter account of Nick Solheim. I do not know who he is. He's the director of business development at Native 3, a digital marketer. I don't know if this is true or not. This may be completely fake, and I want to stress that. And the only reason I'm willing to talk about it is that this is getting a massive amount of attention, so we need to make sure we temper, any rumors or conspiracies. For now, what we see, Nick Solheim has tweeted, "My God, props to Blois Olson for sharing." From Elon, Minnesota's crisis manager, Ben Goldfarb. "Does anyone in the team have a relationship with Blois? Someone should probably reach out to talk off the record as we shut it down with him, as we do with the Strib." The Strib is the Star Tribune, a Minnesota paper. In this email, I can't quite understand how it was structured and how it came to be in the possession of Blois, but somebody was trying to reach out to him because apparently he was sharing the story about Ilhan Omar. They then claim that they've made contact with Star Tribune and actually put pressure on them to shut down certain stories. If that's true, well, that's pretty damning. I reached out to Blois. I didn't get a response on the phone. I reached out to the Star Tribune, also didn't get a response. So for the time being, it's hard to know whether or not any of this is true. I lean more towards it likely is. I think it's really unlikely that someone fabricated this email and is trying to smear Ilhan Omar's team. I did look up this individual, Ben Goldfarb, although I couldn't confirm whether he was directly on Ilhan Omar's team. It may just be, finding a certain story. I pulled up his LinkedIn, and we can see that he does, he presumably does do community organization and progressive politics and marketing and campaigning, so it seems very likely. But in the tweet from Nick Solheim, he says, "There are a number of concerning things. Elon's team attempting to shut down a legitimate inquiry into tax fraud by a local journalist, admitting verbatim that they have employed such tactics before for Minnesota's largest paper, the Star Tribune. Ilhan Omar's campaign staff is so unwilling to go on the record with reputable journalists that they resort to finding a fixer who has a relationship to shut down the story." Nick says, "I, for one, would like to hear a comment from the Star Tribune on what stories have been shut down by Elon's crisis manager through personal relationships, off-the-record interviews, and intimidation tactics. Any journalists care to comment? I traditionally have considered the Star Tribune to be a reputable outlet, aside from the awful editorial board. If Ilhan Omar's fixer was able to shut down stories from the Star Tribune, Imagine how many stories do you think they shut down from Minnesota Post, City Pages, and others. He then goes on to link some other things, and I do want to give a shout out to the redheaded libertarian on Twitter for linking me in this thread to which I found the story and decided to cover it. But all I can really say for now, I haven't confirmed the email. I haven't gotten a comment from any of the parties involved. It may not be legitimate. We'll just leave it there. The reason I did want to address this particularly is because I want to make sure we stress, until we have an official statement from the journalists involved, et cetera, which we haven't gotten so far, we should be careful about running with these stories. However, the individual where it apparently came from, Blois Olson, he's the principal at Fluence Media. I don't think he's actually tweeted about it, which I find to be, I guess, interesting in that case. This is Blois Olson who allegedly leaked the email, and even as of now, you can see I just loaded some new tweets. He hasn't really addressed whether or not this is a real email that he sent, so I can't say I'm thinking this is legitimate, right? I can just put it that way. The Star Tribune, for those that aren't familiar, is just a big paper in Minnesota. But now on to the final bit of this story. Star Tribune issued an editorial board statement slamming Ilhan Omar. They say, Ilhan Omar's credibility takes another hit. Tax return irregularities are just the latest misstep by the first-term congresswoman. So I highlight this story for two reasons. One, I think it's interesting that locally she's being criticized for more problems, potential tax fraud, maybe not campaign finance violations. But also, if it is true that that email circulating is legitimate, well, I'm not entirely sure I believe it, just because they're claiming they have pull with the Star Tribune, but Star Tribune is slamming, their editorial board is criticizing Ilhan Omar. I don't want to say whether it's, I'll put it this way. I cannot confirm or deny the authenticity of that email so far. I wanted to make sure you all know about this and make sure that's the extent to which we talk about it. But let's see what Star Tribune has to say about Ilhan Omar, because they are very critical. The Tribune writes, U.S. Rep. Ilhan Omar is back in the news again, and not in a good way. The former state representative who won a seat in Congress last fall continues to be dogged by past missteps. This time, 8 violations of Minnesota campaign finance law that will cost her nearly $3,500 in reimbursements and civil penalties. So complex were the allegations that the state campaign finance board spent nearly a year assessing the case, deposing staff and former staff people, along with Omar herself. The investigation was broadened in October, just a month before her election to Congress, to look more deeply into the allegations. Board Executive Director Jeff Sigurdsson said that between 6 and 8 people were deposed separately. So let's just, we'll read their final thoughts on the matter because, I think we're good with wrapping up on our final thoughts. They say, if this pattern continues, further investigation may be necessary. Omar could have avoided nearly every infraction by taking simple measures in advance to determine whether her actions would pass legal muster. In its findings, the board noted that Minnesota House research staff did explain that generally, when they discuss whether a member can accept something of value, for example, travel and lodging reimbursement, they discuss whether that would violate the gift prohibition, but do not advise. Rather, they commonly refer members to the board. The Omar committee did not contact board staff on the appropriateness of using committee funds for the travel reviewed in this investigation. Omar's political rise has been marred by a series of unforced errors, including intemperate remarks and tweets earlier this year that were widely perceived as anti-Semitic. Every month seems to bring a fresh problem. As an elected representative for Minnesota and one of the first Muslim women and Somali refugees elected to Congress, Omar is helping to break new ground. But more is expected of her than the symbolism attached to her victory. Omar has a special obligation to be worthy of the trust so many people have placed in her, including many still new Americans who expect better. So, final thoughts, just kind of wrap up where we're at so far. Ilhan Omar filed a factually incorrect tax return. Is it the biggest news in the world? I don't know. The potential collusion between her crisis management and a local paper is alarming as far as I'm concerned. But so far, we have an unconfirmed email rumor. And even if it is confirmed, it's the word of an individual who may be just, talking smack, trying to act like they're bigger than they really are. But I felt like this warranted a main channel video simply because we have seen, I'll put it this way, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Ilhan Omar has been controversial for so long with so many small issues. At a certain point, even if it is just, campaign finance violation, which admittedly it's kind of a big issue. But when you stack this up with all of the other controversies, at a certain point, like the Star Tribune says, the pattern, if the pattern continues, there's got to be more investigation. It's particularly troublesome that she has been repeatedly involved in these scandals, whether it's, her saying offensive things and getting, all of Congress pointed in her direction, criticizing her, or whether or not it's coming out that she's violating campaign finance law. I think these things need to be talked about. And one of the things we have to make sure we don't do is ignoring smaller stories because they're just not big enough. So while I personally feel perhaps talking about some other big breaking news would have been more important, at a certain point, there are so many small stories about Ilhan Omar, it's got to come together and say, listen, this is a pattern of bad behavior that needs to be highlighted in a longer piece. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is just, local news and doesn't need to be a main channel video, but I kind of feel like it's gotten to that point where there may be no other congressperson who is as controversial as Ilhan Omar. Maybe Ocasio-Cortez, but, she's not, Cortez has been accused of many things, but this is pretty serious, right? Whether or not the people of Minnesota, want to reelect her, it's up to them. But I think the news is important. So comment below, let me know what you think. We'll keep the conversation going. You can follow me on Minds at Timcast. Stay tuned. I will have more videos at youtube.com/TimcastNews starting at 6 p.m. and I will see you all there.